Hello and welcome everybody, and happy World Mental Health Day to you, Mental Health Month. There's lots of different ways that people, individuals, organisations are marking this very significant time of year around the world. And it's such a pleasure to be here today to support you all and to share a perspective around looking at what we can do to release the stigma attached to mental health and what might be stopping the conversation for some people in some cultures. So it's really great to be here. So lovely to see so many of you here today as well, and dialing in from all different parts of the world. We've had Dublin, we've had Croatia, London, Essex. So it's really lovely to have so many of you here dialing in from different places. And for those of you watching the replay, I hope you enjoy. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen with you all, and hopefully everyone can see that. Do let me know if there's any issues, of course, in the chat box as usual. So, mental health, what's stopping the conversation? This was a topic that we were really passionate about exploring for this time of year as a team. And we really took time to work out, well, what is it that would really highlight, what's perhaps getting in the way for people having more open conversations around mental health, because I think we're all noticing and are aware of so much more information around mental health. There's a lot more awareness around this in general as a topic, but yet there is still the stigma. And so we really want to grapple with that a little bit more today, tackle that issue a little bit more, and hopefully have an empowering outcome for you all. So for those of you who have not engaged with Karma before, we are a UK-based global mental health and burnout prevention training organisation focused on empowering entrepreneurs, freelancers and business teams to nurture mental wellness and to prevent burnout from escalating. So our philosophy is that we believe a happy mind makes for a happy business, and these are our three core values that are underpinned across all our training resources, educational resources. We believe in the power of education, nurturing your mindset and your well-being, community, building your support system and your tribe, and connection, cultivating a deeper connection with yourself and others, and the importance of really placing value in the journey of self-awareness. So the event outcomes from today, what I really want to explore with you all and help empower you to consider really important steps moving forward is having an overview of recent national and global statistics around common societal stigma associated with mental health today, particularly considering how far we've come in our awareness of mental health, but that there definitely is still a way to go. An understanding of the origins of mental health stigma and the benefits of prioritising mental wellness in daily life, and strategies to empower more meaningful conversations about mental health, both in and outside of work. So, this year's World Mental Health Day, the theme explored, as set by the World Federation for Mental Health, is mental health is a universal human right, which we at Karma, of course, absolutely hugely advocate for and think this is a very timely and important topic to explore. So the theme recognises that everybody, regardless of background, status or ability, has a universal right to understand and receive support for mental health issues. So the World Federation of Mental Health has highlighted these three key areas of focus this year. So the first one is the right to be protected from known harms to mental health, a universal right which applies to the entire population, but especially the vulnerable, including children, minorities and the displaced peoples. Number two is the right to access quality and affordable healthcare when a person is struggling with their mental health. And number three, the right to freedom and dignity, including the right of choice. So really powerful statements there. And each of these points really paves the way for the conversation and action in the mental health arena. And through this event, our goal is to empower individuals like yourselves and organisations to consider the valuable part each and every one of us play in letting go of the stigma associated with mental health and encouraging more open and inclusive conversations. So as I said before, we've come a really long way in our understanding of the complexity of mental health, but there really is still a long way to go. And the reality is that our mental health plays a vital part in our overall health and well-being. Like, put simply, when our mental health is affected, it has a knock-on effect on the other aspects of our well-being. So everything starts with the mind when you think about it. Put simply, mental health is the state of your mind's health at any given moment in time, based on your external circumstances, internal triggers, whatever you've got going on in your life, and it fluctuates. We all have mental health, just like we have physical, emotional health, etc. And so when we think about that connection between our mind, body, our emotions, etc., it makes sense because everything is interconnected. We all have a brain, a mind, physical body, emotions encased within that being, and they're in constant communication with one another. In many cultures, though, like I say, we've come a really long way, but whether it's at a national, a company, or a familial level, when we look at a cultural perspective of how mental health is understood, there still exists a pressure to keep worries, feelings, or problems to yourself, or not to discuss them outside of that cultural community. And why is that? That's what we want to unpick today as well. Whether due to lack of awareness, potentially, or education, or other reasons, this often leads individuals to feel stifled in their self-expression, and it can prevent them from seeking support. It can prevent them from, reaching out for the help that they really need. It can impair recovery, and even lead to, continued mental health issues as well. So that's something that really we feel passionate about trying to, explore further and trying to come up with a solution. There's lots of solutions that there can be. So for today, it's really focusing on what can we do as individuals to really empower ourselves and other people to let go of that stigma. So a few stats to bear in mind. So nearly 9 in 10 people with mental health problems say that stigma and discrimination have a negative effect on their lives. So that's a lot of people when you look at the average. And just put in another way, when we're exploring what the stigma really is, there's a really nice quote from the Royal College of Psychiatrists that highlights this. So they cite that stigma is the perception that a certain attribute makes a person unacceptably different from others, leading to prejudice and discrimination against them. So I think that's a really nice way of encapsulating what stigma really is. And so 9 in 10 people with mental health issues feel that stigma and discrimination, and it really does have an effect on their lives. People with mental health problems are also among the least likely of any group with a long-term health condition or disability to find work, maintain long-term relationships, or live in even decent housing, and to be socially included in mainstream society. So it's not just in one area, it really can impact people in so many areas of their life when they're feeling misunderstood, perhaps, or discriminated against. And finally, mental health stigma can also lead to societal discrimination, including stereotyped views on mental ill health and sensationalized media reports and stories. So these citations stem from primarily the Mental Health Foundation, a great resource to look into further information around mental health when you have the time. So just on that last point as well, so just to expand on this, some people believe people with mental health problems are dangerous, when in fact they're at a higher risk of being attacked or harming themselves rather than hurting other people. I think that is a really important point to just hone in on here, that there's still a wide perception that people with mental health issues are likely to be dangerous or harmful to other people. But actually, when you think about it, going through a mental health problem is an internal experience, and somebody going through that is much more likely to be at harm to themselves or struggle in themselves than be, concerned with hurting or harming other people. Also, when it comes to media reports, this can often be, sensationalized stories around mental ill health, linking it with violence or portraying people with mental health problems as dangerous, criminal, evil, or very disabled and unable to live normal, fulfilled lives, which again is a very kind of one tunnel vision way of looking at mental health problems. Now, it's varied, of course, that there's mild to moderate to severe experiences of mental health problems and conditions and diagnoses. But again, it's just media reports that sensationalize this version of mental health problems, which perhaps isn't as helpful in terms of, influencing an open-minded perspective of mental health from a societal level. But it also can focus on stories of problems, challenges, crises associated with mental health primarily, which then creates an imbalance of positive news stories around mental wellness. How much do we hear that term being used? Or what is it that aids our well-being and nurtures our mental health, etc.? So, when we think about physical health, we don't just talk about physical ailments, disabilities, fracture, struggles, etc. We talk about, if anything, primarily what we know aids our physical well-being, such as fitness, exercise, nutrition, eating healthy, keeping fit, keeping well, the things that we know are important and good for maintaining good physical health. And I feel we need to get that to that place with mental health as well, that when we're talking about mental health, it's not that we're just talking about problems and issues or just focusing on those stories, because that can drive the stigma more. We also need to be exploring, what does mental wellness mean? What does good mental health look like? What does it mean to nurture and support and look after our mental health and well-being? So a citation that I would really encourage you all to look into as well is the World Health Report from the World Health Organization. I'll add a link to that at the end of this episode, and we'll add all links that I'll be sharing today at the bottom of our video on the YouTube channel as well. But in recent years, there's been an increasing acknowledgement of the important role that mental health plays in achieving global development goals, as illustrated by the inclusion of mental health in the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, with depression being recognised as one of the leading causes of disability. Even more stark, the World Health Organization also cites that people with severe mental health conditions can die prematurely, as much as 2 decades early, due to preventable physical conditions, which is pretty shocking when you really think about it. So despite progress in some countries, people with mental health conditions often experience severe human rights violations, discrimination, and stigma. And the reality is that many mental health conditions can be effectively treated at relatively low cost, yet the gap between people needing care and those with access to care remains substantial, and effective treatment coverage remains extremely low, incredibly low from a global perspective. So in this report, it really cites that increased investment is required on all of these fronts. So mental health awareness to increase understanding, reduce the stigma. This is vitally important. And we've seen in recent years, a huge rise in mental health educational courses, programs, for example, for organizations, a place of work where, many of us spend so much of our time, which is a great place to start, but also thinking of outside of work with your social connections and, day-to-day lives, etc. And of course, that is a primary, aspect of what we deliver at Karma. It's training courses, workshops, events, etc., to raise awareness of mental health, to educate organizations, business teams, etc., and understanding the complexity of mental health and how to prevent burnout from escalating, and what can we do to reduce the stigma. Other areas of investment, there needs to be increased efforts to increase access to quality mental health care and effective treatments, of course, vitally important, and research to identify new treatments and improve existing treatments for all mental health diagnoses. So all of this is covered and more in the mental health, World Mental Health Report, which I think, like I said, I can't encourage enough to just have a further look at after this session as well. So many areas here to explore further. So what I would love to do now is ask you all the questions. So please do share in the chat box. When we're thinking of the origins of mental health stigma, what is stopping the conversation today in our modern day lives? We're living in an age of inspiration, in awareness, in knowledge. We have so much research at the tip of our fingers. We have so much more awareness around mental health than ever before in our history. And we're living in the best time there's ever been for mental health support, even though there is space for further investment in more research, further investment in more care, etc., for when people are struggling. Why is there still the stigma? Where do you think that comes from? I would love to hear your perspectives on that. So I'm just going to come out of screen share for a moment and to just read in the chat box what people are saying. So yeah, we've got media. Absolutely. As I said before, there's so much to be said for that. Media have a huge part to play in influencing public perception on various topics, and it's so important to always be mindful, especially in this age of, the potential for fake news and, false information sharing online. there are so many credible resources out there. So always check and really consider which sources you're looking into. Number one, when you're looking at any media stories, really. But when it comes to stories around mental health, there are media outlets now that really do focus on positive news sharing as well. So I would also really encourage that, such as Positive News. Literally does what it says on the tin. You can look them up online. So they're a print and digital magazine, Positive News. You've got Happyful magazine. You've got the Happy newspaper, and all of these sources are really driving towards sharing information that is unbiased, and also shining a light on all the positive, really amazing things that are going on in the world, but also shining a different light on other aspects of mental well-being. So that's important to highlight. Culture, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that too. I get some incredibly insightful feedback from so many sessions that we deliver at Karma, where there are certain countries around the world where mental health, there isn't even that clear translation in that language. So even to have the term mental health in that language is quite difficult to articulate or to describe. So really, studies have shown it's more the westernized part of the world that is in particular more sort of advanced in sharing and openness and awareness around mental health. But from a cultural perspective, there are still some countries around the world where it's just not talked about at all. It's not acknowledged as important as physical health and all those other aspects of our health. So that is important to recognize too. We have trouble being vulnerable on bigger scales in the corporate world. Absolutely. And older generations brought up with just get on with the attitudes. Yeah, for sure. Both really valid points there too. Thank you for sharing. Vulnerability, can I just say, is a strength. It absolutely is. It's the opposite of weakness. If you are sharing, opening up about something you need help with, that takes a great deal of courage in itself and strength to do so. So I believe that one way, that a really powerful way we can shift and remove slowly the stigma associated with mental health is looking at our language and the words that we choose and associate with this topic of mental health. So if you hear someone saying something like, I don't want to be seen as weak, just by you saying to them, it actually takes a great deal of strength. And I see it takes, for me, I feel like it takes a lot of courage to open up. So, please know that it does take strength to do that. That in itself, our words that we say have weight, they have meaning, they have power, and they can influence a positive thought in someone else's mind and help them, to perhaps do something useful and helpful and kind for themselves. And that can create a positive ripple effect, in terms of what they then think and share with other people. So vulnerability and the capacity and the space to do that, especially in the corporate world, it's so vitally important, because we're not just work cells turning up to work like robots and machines. We are human beings, not human doings. That's one of my favorite phrases. Some of you who have followed Karma for a long time may have heard me say that a few times, or us as a team. But it's true, we're not made like machines. We need time to reflect, to reassess how things are going. We are processing emotions all the time. We are showing up to work as our complex full selves. And so there has to be that space if there's something going on or that we need support with, because, there's a direct link between our health and our well-being and productivity as well. And particularly the point about generations. Absolutely. There's different eras in different time historically that has led to different perceptions about mental health. And, when we think about the field of neuroscience research and understanding the brain, the mind, how it functions in the body, there's only been really strong advancements in that field of research since the 1970s. So anything pre that time, mental health was severely misunderstood. So it stands to reason that there wouldn't be as much openness perhaps about understanding and exploring that topic of mental health pre that time, So that's something that's also really important to recognize, that everything is of its time, and everything evolves. But where we are now, we can use to our advantage that we're in an age of, as I said before, information, awareness, knowledge, and research, that we can perhaps start to challenge outdated perceptions and ideas of mental health in a kind way. We've got another point here. Hi, Catherine. Thank you so much for joining. Dismissing people's struggles, i.e. Philippa Perry earlier this week, she argued that where ADHD is currently the mental health term on everyone's lips, it has taken over from bipolar disorder, which was once the fashionable condition to have. Very, very good point. So dismissing people's struggles there, absolutely. Also, there's a misperception there around the link between neurodiversity and mental health differences as well. I mean, that's a whole other topic for another time. But, studies have shown that people living with neurodiverse differences are perhaps more likely to struggle with their mental health, but they're both, when you look at both topics, they're quite different, because you're talking about, someone's brain neuro makeup versus mental health, which is the state that we all have. We all have different states of mental health, but we all have mental health. Not everybody would be diagnosed with necessarily a neurodiverse difference. There is the important differentiation between the two, and it's, and it can affect people in so many different ways, neurodiverse differences or mental health conditions. But there is a link between them as well. Like I say, a big topic to get into, but a really important topic to raise here as well. So thank you so much, Catherine. So it's so important not to dismiss people's struggles. And, one thing that we always say at Karma is that, whatever you feel, whatever you're going through is valid and real to you, just as whatever anyone else is going through is valid and real to them. You don't have to fully understand someone in order to empathize, in order to choose compassion, kindness, and understanding of someone's experience, because what they feel is real to them, just as what you feel is real to you. So I'm going to come back to screen share now. Thank you so much for those wonderful additions to exploring where the stigma comes from that's associated with mental health. So what I'm going to share with you now is looking at different perspectives. And like I say, the terminology, language, exploration of how we talk about mental health, I believe this is such a vital part of stemming from this place when we're looking at removing the stigma. It's how do we talk about it? Because we're interacting in day-to-day lives, all of us together, whether we're communicating at work, outside of work, etc. And the words we say have power and meaning, and they can make a meaningful difference when your words are chosen for good, for compassion, for kindness. They can make such a meaningful difference in other people's lives and help shed away those, inaccurate perceptions, perhaps mental health. So let's talk about mental wellness and mental illness, right? It's not just, if we're talking about mental health, we're talking about a problem, because there's so much complexity to mental health. And when we look at mental wellness, there's lots of ways to describe this, but one exploration is from the Global Wellness Institute. Mental wellness is an internal resource that helps us think, feel, connect, and function. It is an active process that helps us to build resilience, grow, and flourish. So this isn't about saying it's about experiencing good mental health all the time and feeling happy and positive all the time. It's waves, right? When you experience joy, really being in that moment and present with it is important, but understanding that whatever you go through in life, whatever challenges or stresses you face, actually a sign of mental wellness and good mental health as well is how do you choose to address that as it arises? How do you manage it? What are your coping skills? Who do you reach out to for help and support? How do you navigate times of challenge and uncertainty and build resilience through that as well? And the World Health Organization cites mental illness as a mental disorder, also referred to as a mental health condition, which is characterized by a clinically significant disturbance in an individual's cognition, emotional regulation, or behavior. It is usually associated with distress or impairment in important areas of functioning. And, over the years, because mental health is silent, you can't see it, it's hidden, it's nothing tangible that you can touch or feel. It's so down to each individual person's life experience that's led them to where they are today, their levels of tolerance, stress levels, how they cope with stress, how they build resilience. That's all unique to each individual person on this earth, right? Every single one of us is unique. And so because it is hidden and you can't see it, sometimes it's hard to understand human behavior, or the way that people interact, or the way they're responding to something. And because with a physical health condition, for example, you can see someone's physical body or visually see if someone's got, a disability or something like that. You can't necessarily see that with mental health. And so there's this sort of stigma that's become attached to that over the years, and this misunderstanding, misinterpretation of people's behavior and how they're coming across. And then more of a conversation led to being around problems and issues. But there's such a wide exploration of mental health states that's so important to explore. And just put simply and quickly, mental health functions as a scale. It fluctuates. We all experience different states of well-being. And when we look at well-being, this encapsulates how we feel and function on a day-to-day basis. It's how we feel in terms of our mental health, physical health, social health, emotional health, and spiritual health. In terms of our diet, sleep, exercise, all these factors contribute to our state of health and well-being in general at large. But that's a huge term when we look at health and well-being. When we look at mental health, it has a huge part. It's like the starting point for what can lead to the experience of what we feel emotionally, physically, etc. So our thoughts linked to our physical responses and our emotional behavior. And so whether experience a positive state of mental health, neutral state, or state of poor mental health, we can all fluctuate on this scale. And it's so dependent on the various aspects of what's going on in our lives at any given time. There's so much research into this very complex field, but our environment really does play a big part in terms of what dictates how we feel, how we behave, etc. Some of you may be aware of this resource already, but it's definitely worth re-mentioning. We have a blog called The 5 Stages of Burnout. So I'd really encourage you to look at this in more detail when you have time. It's our highest performing blog. And this is what a lot of our educational content is based on, this model of 5 stages of burnout, which is influenced by the Winona State University study on burnout. But this just really highlights the journey of understanding what stress is, how it can build to burnout, and how that can escalate. It's so important to understand that journey because we hear about stress and burnout a lot these days, but they're not too similar. There's loads of different states in between, and being stressed and being burnt out, very, very different states. So really important to understand that when we're looking at the mental health journey, starting with, feeling well in yourself, feeling good, experiencing mental wellness, and what does that stress journey look like? When could it escalate into burnout? When could it be too much, etc.? So just an extra resource. Again, we'll add this, excuse me, to the end of the presentation on at the bottom of the recording on our YouTube channel for you to look at as well. So let's look at some empowering, meaningful conversations in and outside of work. How can we make an impact? How can we play our part to remove the stigma? So ways that you can challenge the stigma at work: leading by example, not just as a manager, a senior leader, but as colleague to colleague as well. Sharing with your team how you manage stress, be open in that conversation, because we're living in a time of high stress states, particularly as we're in a digitally switched on 24/7 world, and so many people are feeling pressure to work around the clock, to not switch off, have to check emails here, there, and everywhere. And it's not natural to our state as human beings into a healthy state. We do need time to switch off and reflect, and it's difficult to do in a constantly switched on world. So talk about how you manage stress. It's a really valuable part of the process of nurturing mental health. Actively discuss various perspectives of mental health. Talk about mental wellness as well as mental illness. Let's widen that dialogue around mental health. Reframe the stigma surrounding vulnerability as a sign of weakness, as I talked about earlier, and offer the perspective instead that it takes strength and courage to open up. Also facilitating a wellbeing check-in at the start of your one-to-ones and team meetings, even if it's just asking a simple question like, what are you doing for your wellbeing this week? Opening up people's minds to really thinking about that, prioritizing health and wellbeing around all your other commitments in your life, because if you're not feeling well in yourself, it'll have a knock-on effect and impact on everything else you're trying to do in that week. Promoting internal and external employee resources and support resources as well, really valuable and important to be consistent with at work, and not just visuals like in your inbox or in the office, but talking about it in your meetings, printing stuff off. People can touch, feel something, read it in their hands. We all take information in different ways, so really exploring that is important. When we think about in general, outside of work or inside of work, promoting accurate language around mental health. So they're experiencing mental health problems or mental health issues, i.e. it doesn't define who you are if you're struggling with your mental health, i.e. you're not a depressed person or a anxious person or a stressed out person. You're someone experiencing depression, or you're going through anxiety, or you're experiencing different stress levels that's challenging for you. And the more we normalize that, the more that can lessen the stigma attached to mental health as a topic as well. So really describe mental health when you're talking about it, like they're struggling with their mental health, another example. Or what can you do to support, nurture your mental health? How can you nurture mental wellness? Again, really shifting and angling the dialogue in positive ways. Let's talk about positive language associated with mental health more perhaps than we do already. Just like when we're talking about physical health and fitness, nutrition, energy, all those things that we know are good for our physical well-being. The state of your mental health does not define who you are. It's a vital part of how you function in your well-being, and it can fluctuate from day to day. So rather than put pressure on ourselves to think, I have to feel really well in myself for X period of time or this many days, etc., it's just noticing as and when those ebbs and flows come, because that's life. Life is ebbs and flows. You never know what's going to come around the corner. You never know what's happening each day. You just got to roll with it and do your best, put simply. So when you're noticing those moments of joy, those moments of happiness, those moments of contentment, gratitude, really sitting in those moments, appreciating it fully, being present, noticing, okay, if this changes, if it fluctuates, that's how life goes, and I'm going to welcome those ebbs and flows and learn from them and explore what's going on each time it happens. We all have mental health, just like we have physical and emotional health. I think that's a really important language piece to explore as well. Start connecting it. There is a connection, very strong mind-body connection, going on all the time. So we need to explore that. Mental health is silent, it's intangible, whereas physical health is more tangible. You can see people's physical bodies, but it's not always easy to know what's going on in someone's mind. That, as I said earlier, it's valid, it's real to you. It's really important. I feel anxious versus I am anxious. So again, just encouraging others to flip the language. Like I said before about, instead of saying I am an anxious person or I am depressed, you absolutely may feel very valid in that experience, but by saying feel, that just detaches it a little bit more from identifying with defining yourself by that condition or experience or challenging emotion, versus it's something you're going through, it's something you're experiencing, it's something that you have the potential and the hope to recover from. It's not necessarily going to always be this way. Things change and evolve all the time, particularly with mild to moderate states of anxiety or depression. Here I'm talking about, I'm not necessarily referring to severe experiences of mental health diagnoses, but general day-to-day, I feel this way, I'm feeling anxious, I'm noticing that I'm feeling quite low. That's acknowledging feelings change, and they fluctuate. So it doesn't define who you are, but it's part of your journey. Being kind to yourself, a really important note to wrap up on with this presentation. Little steps that we can all do for ourselves and encourage others to do to nurture good mental health is prioritising your well-being, just as you prioritise other commitments in your life. Taking time for yourself away from distractions and really putting boundaries around that. And that can happen in a multitude of ways, and different things work for different people, of course. If we had more time to get into that, then we could. But I really encourage you to think, what does that mean for you? Switching off from distractions, moving away from technology, and just taking a bit of time. What does that look and feel like to you? What would the ideal be? Be mindful of your own limits and boundaries, and what does that mean to you? Again, means different things to different people. Practice relaxation techniques. Even just taking 1 mindful minute can make a difference. That's one of my favorite exercises to explore in our sessions, because it sounds simple, but it's incredibly important and it's incredibly impactful. Just take 1 minute. We all can afford that in our days. Even if you take a few deep breaths in and release those breaths in an extended way, repeats for 4 to 5 times, that's 1 minute. And that's just breathing deeply, tapping into conscious breathing, being present, exercising those, your lung capacity, and really tapping into calming the nervous system, and that can just make all the difference you need within a short period of time if you don't have a lot of time. Remember, it is a sign of strength to ask for help when you need it. Please remember that, and encourage others to think that as well, because it is absolutely genuinely true. Because you're then in a really important place to get the help and support that you need, so that's vitally important. So there are further resources and support and information here. Like I say, I'll add these to the bottom of the video as well. But you can look into the Equality Act, which protects you from discrimination, lets you challenge it. The Equality Advisory and Support Service can advise you if you've been discriminated against, whatever the circumstance, in work, outside of work, in your life. The Advisory Conciliation and Arbitration Service, or known as ACAS, can advise you if you think you've been discriminated against at work. And Diversity and Difference, Cultural Context, a really great resource on the Mind website, mental health charity. I'm just looking at the different cultural contexts and associations with mental health. And the World Mental Health Report that I referenced earlier, Transforming Mental Health for All, this is a really great resource to look into further as well. So I hope you've all found this really useful today, has given you food for thought and empowered you to think about what steps you can take as an individual to let go of the stigma, to empower others to let go of the stigma, what you can do in your conversations at work, outside of work, to just all, collectively, in our own ways, just really empower ourselves to let go of the stigma longer term. And as I always say, here's to your inner and outer success, not just what people see on the inside, but not just what people see on the outside, but what is also going on the inside. That's very, very important. So here's to your inner and outer success. So do feel free to follow us on social media for more information, more resources, more inspiration. At This Is Karma. We're primarily on Instagram, LinkedIn, and Twitter, and thisiskarma.com is our website. So thank you all so much for joining today. I hope you found it really valuable, really useful. it's given you a lot of food for thought. And I really wish you all the best moving forward. And we'll save this video, as I mentioned before, to our YouTube channel. And once again, happy World Mental Health Day to you all. I wish you all the best. Thank you for joining today. And we look forward to connecting with you again. Take care, everyone. See you soon.